So I just finished reading the Picture of Dorian Gray, and I've decided to dress up a little bit for this video just because of sort of the nature of the book. So the novel was written by Oscar Wilde, and many people consider it to be sort of his magnum opus, and it basically just sort of covers English gentlemanly society, sort of the lives of the aristocracy, and so this is my like third take trying to get this. And I really don't care anymore, so I'm just gonna like I was gonna talk about themes and but I think I'm just going to say how I felt about it. So basically, it's just about this guy, Dorian Gray, who at the start he's in this painting session with this guy called Basil Hallward, and so Basil Hallward is painting, and there's this clear sort of ravenous passion for like Dorian Gray's youth and his luster. Basil Hallward has this entire section where he just talks about how much he sort of loves Dorian in this platonic, maybe slightly kind of sexual way, where it's just and obviously lots of people are going to read into it as being like, homosexual and stuff because of Oscar Wilde's own thing, of his own, like status of being gay. But honestly, I think it's just this like sort of passion. It's just this passion for beauty, where he sees Dorian Gray as this sort of thing, this being of such beauty that he's unwilling to sort of part with it. Originally, they talk about exhibiting his painting, and Basil's entirely against it because he says he doesn't sort of want people peeking into this obsession that he has with Dorian, this kind of unhealthy nature. And so at the start, they're doing that, and then this guy, Lord Henry, who's friends with Basil, comes in, and he's basically, he's watching, he's like, oh, look at you, Dorian, um, and Basil's like, don't talk to them, Dorian. Like he doesn't want to be, he doesn't want this beautiful image of Dorian to be corrupted because to him, Dorian's this sort of like, beautiful kind of child, like youth thing. But anyways, what happens is afterwards, Lord Henry talks to Dorian Gray about a bunch of stuff. He's like, oh, why don't you want to, enjoy your youth, sort of go out, really like live, like, pursue this sort of hedonist Epicurean lifestyle. And Dorian Gray originally, he's sort of against it. Well, I mean, before this, he's sort of, apprehensive, but he hears Lord Henry talk about all this stuff. And then he thinks, oh, you know what? He's got a good point. And he sort of meets up with Lord Henry, again after. He meets him again after, and he also Lord Henry issues gives him this book that's sort of about like materialism and stuff like that. Materialism and aestheticism is a very big thing in the book. Constantly, there's references to like you know the decor, sort of these Oriental decorations that they have, being at sort of the height of the British Empire, and having all these things from the colonies and the peripheries sort of just collected in the houses of these lords. And so Dorian slowly becomes corrupted in this way, and he starts to really start pursuing his youth. And so what happens after that is he basically in one day falls in love with this girl called Sybil Vane. Dorian basically falls in love with her immediately, and it becomes his own obsession where he sees her. He goes to the theater every night to go watch her perform Shakespeare. He watches her in all these different roles. He goes on about how he watches her as what's it, Juliet, and then Miranda, and then as who is the main character of As You Like It? I forgot, but it's that one. And basically, he he goes there every night. He's absolutely obsessed with her. And then basically he also comes to her after the performances as this like what he calls himself as Prince Charming, and seduces her. Sort of, it's kind of like this backhand thing where Sybil's mother begrudgingly sort of agrees, even though she knows that really to Dorian Gray, Sybil Vane is basically sort of like a fling. He's this wealthy man, and she herself was ran out on in her youth. So the both the Vane children are both the children of the aristocracy, but then um, he ran off, and so basically they caught each other, and then so Sybil Vane's brother, James Vane, says that he'll take revenge for her if she is wronged by her Prince Charming, and then he goes to Melbourne as a sailor, which is quite quite ironic and nice because I currently live in Melbourne, and so it's nice seeing that. And so basically, what happens after that is Dorian's like, oh, she's so obsessed. He's like, he tells Lord Henry, he's like, you've got to come see her. She's like the best. Every time she acts, it's like magic. It's like she really becomes the character. And so they go, and then when they go there, Sybil Vane puts on the most atrocious performance she's ever put on. Because what's happened is that she's truly fallen in love with Dorian Gray. She's so obsessed with him that she cannot even pretend to be in love with anyone else. And so all of her passion is just drained, and she delivers this just really dead, really boring speech. To the point where Lord Henry's like, right, I'm not even gonna watch this anymore. I'm leaving. Right. And so he leaves. And then so Dorian's like, "Oh, you're really embarrassing. Like this is awful. I really feel like he's like really embarrassed." And after he uh he goes he goes to Sybil Vane and he's like what like why would you do this? I don't love you anymore. I'm done with you. We're done. And she's totally heartbroken. She just tells him, please don't go. Like I swear I'll be better next time. I'll really act. I'll really put an emotion next time, right? My love has blinded me. And yeah, and then Dorian leaves like coldly. And so the next morning he thinks about it and he's like, oh, maybe I acted a little bit rashly yesterday. I acted in a fit of passion. Maybe I shouldn't have. I'll make it up to her. And so he drafts this letter, this love letter to her of, a really beautiful thing. And then he gets really excited. He's like, oh, I'll give it to her. And then he receives the message that Sybil Vane has killed herself. And initially, while he's dispirited, he shakes it off like pretty quick. Originally, he's a little bit like drawn aback. He's like, oh my gosh, what's happened? And then with Lord Henry's sort of convincing and stuff, he just sort of shakes. He's like, you know what? This is just a part of life. She died the way she wanted, immortalized on the stage. She, became the character, this sort of fleeting image of beauty. And so afterwards, so during this time, what happens is through these interactions, as Dorian sort of loses himself to his passions and his hedonism, this painting that Basil Hallward has completed at the very start of the book and given to Dorian that he originally he said didn't want to exhibit, and that's been sitting in Dorian's home. It slowly starts to change. The painting itself, with no editing, nothing. The painting itself begins to change. It begins to become ugly, which Dorian initially he's like, wait, that doesn't feel right. Because at the very start, what happened is Dorian after being told by by Lord Henry that he will grow old and that eventually, his youth is fleeting, which is, what's also convinces him to go on this sort of hedonistic Epicurean sort of journey. And so he curses it. He's like, hate that. I want it so that the painting, I will always stay young and the painting will grow old instead of me. And so that's what actually starts happening. The painting takes on all this bad negative energy that he's been putting into the world. As he, stays forever young, the painting becomes uglier and uglier. And so what happens is he tries to hide it. He goes out into society, he goes to meetings, but he always has it on his mind. He can't leave it for too long. He always has to come back to it and cover it to make sure, no one's been looking at it. And so this goes on to the point where he can't take it anymore. He says, oh, I can't like maintain this sort of thing where I have to hide it all the time. Well, at least keep it in like. So basically, what he does is he goes into this old room, upstairs, which is his grandfather's old room, It's this office space where he used to play, and it's a place where he sort of despises. It's a room. I'm not sure why, but this room has such a negative energy that Dorian is almost afraid to sort of face it initially. And so what he does is he places this painting in this room, and then he locks the door to make sure that nobody ever goes in. And so after that, so years pass, and Dorian's name slowly becomes tarnished, marred by accusations of some things about Sybil Vane, and also just the sort of bad influence and bad luck he has on others. People complain that everyone who gets too close to Dorian ends up getting hurt, and so what happens is after this, there's an episode where Dorian meets Basil Hallward on accident. So years have passed, and then he meets Basil, and Basil, still recognizes him. And Basil, even though he's not that obsessed, he still, has he still likes Dorian. And he's like, well, I'm about to go to Paris, but can I, come stay with you for a bit? I want to, we will catch up. And Dorian, originally is apprehensive. He doesn't really want it that much, but then, he eventually. And so basically what happens is they start talking. Dorian gets pressed, and basically Dorian is like, you know what? Come with me. Let's go to the painting upstairs. I'll show you the painting. Because Basil's asking him, he's like, oh, well, what about my painting? What's going on with it? Like, I want to see it. And so gets pressed, and he takes him upstairs to this office room, to see the painting. But Dorian's also, he's really again, he's still ashamed. And so when they go in, what happens is there's a back and forth, and Dorian basically kills Basil. He kills him. I think he stabs him to death. He stabs him to death, and he just leaves him lying on the table in this his own pool of blood. And after this happens, the painting grows even more bloody. It grows old. It gets twisted. He's marred by this aspect of death. And afterwards, Dorian, he's killed someone. He doesn't know what to do. He asks this Campbell guy, to help him dispose of the body. Originally, he's nice about it. He's like, "Oh, can you do me a favor? We're friends." And then he blackmails him. What he says is unclear to the reader, but he says some things that changes Campbell, that blackmails him, threatens him so much that he's like, "Okay, well, I'll do it." And so he disposes of the body and then leaves. Then later on, we find out that Campbell, hangs himself, not hangs himself, but just he kills himself. Uh, Shortly after. So after this whole episode of disposing of the body, Dorian, again, he recovers surprisingly fast from killing someone. He doesn't sort of stay on that too long. And so what he does after is he goes out on this night ride one night to what I think is like an opium den, or a bar or something like that. And he goes in, he sees a bunch of I think some Malaysian guys playing dice. He sees some old woman, and then one of them calls him Prince Charming. And at the sight of being called Prince Charming, the sailor wakes up, starts to chase after him. And then, and then as the reader, we realize, oh, the sailor is James Vane. And he goes and he tries to kill Dorian. But then as he gets close, and he's about to kill him, he looks, the light girl goes on Dorian. And Dorian's like, look at my face. Do you really think your sister's been dead for over 10 years? Do you really think this is the face of the murder? And then he looks at him, and Dorian is still, he looks like he's in his 20s. Even though this is probably he's in his 40s now, 30s, 40s. He should be an old man, but he still looks so youthful. And James Vane, he's like, maybe I don't think so. Maybe that it can't be you. But what happens is one of the old ladies sort of tells him, stay on him. That guy, he's fishy. So after Dorian goes hunting, he goes to this hunting with some of the other members, some other society members, just some gentlemen, and they're shooting rabbits. And then Dorian's like, don't shoot that rabbit. He suddenly gets this urge, like, please don't shoot this rabbit. And the guy listens. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you on about? Like, I do what I want. And then he kills the rabbit. But then what they realize is that he accidentally kills this guy. And we find out this guy's James Vane, and he's been stalking Dorian. And so Dorian is kind of he's initially he's a little bit guilty. He's like, oh well, look, I've killed James Vane, and I couldn't stop him from shooting him. But after he thinks, oh well, now I know I'm safe. No one's coming after me now. And you know, everyone else is still growing older. There's this part where Lord Henry's like, oh, why aren't you growing older? Like Dorian. And Dorian is still so young. Like, you know, Lord Henry's getting wrinkled, his hair's going white and stuff. And then Lord Dorian Gray is still, he looks like he's in his 20s still. And so Dorian eventually, he thinks about it, and his life is sort of just awful near the end. And so what he does at the end is he attempts to remove the painting by Basil. He thinks, you know what? I'll just go destroy the painting. This has been the cause of all my sorrow and all my grief and all my stress. He's been obsessing over this painting for the last how many years? You know, and so he goes to remove the painting, and the painting is just ugly. At this point, the painting is so like the man in the painting so old that he doesn't even resemble Dorian Gray. He's so old and twisted. The guilt of all the shame of everything he's done is etched into the furrows of his face. And so he goes to stab it and he goes to kill it. And so later, what happens is the servants hear this like sort of like a sound, and then they go to check on their master. And then they go into his room and they see this man lying on the floor. And this really old, twisted man, this old, sort of deformed person. And I don't believe it's Dorian. They think, who is this person? Only when they check his rings to find out that it really is Dorian Gray. And so, the book sort of acts as this criticism of sort of, you know, hedonism, of like this, or acts as like the critique of sort of gentlemanly society. It's about all these people who are, so wealthy, so unbelievably wealthy, and hold themselves to be the bastions of culture, only to be so cruel and so indifferent. Sybil Vane basically just becomes this plaything for Dorian Gray. She lives and she dies basically um by his whim, and by like he basically tosses her away like a toy, and it's awful. And then Lord Henry is just he acts as this very bad influence. And it was also this sort of this aspect of self obsession. Obviously, there's the part where Dorian, he decides he never wants to grow. Never wants to grow old. Yeah, you have to. The painting still grows old because something has to take on the shame. The shame and the guilt of life has to be taken on by people. As humans, we take on all the guilt and all the shame of life. Like that's what you carry that with you. There's no way to sort of make that go away. What your actions will inevitably, etch themselves onto you, whether that be your physical form or your mental form. And so you realize, even though Dorian looks so young at the very end of the book, he's just this old, deformed, twisted man at the very end of his life because that's the way he lived. That's the way, he decided he wanted to give up like caring. So, yeah, I think, look, the book's quite short. The book's only about, the one I read is only about 200 pages, the edition I read, and it is really good. So I knocked it out in like, basically, I knocked it out in like a day. Because it's really easy to knock out in a day. And, you know, the writing style, Oscar Wilde's writing style is just impeccable. Some of the moments are so beautiful, and he really captures that, he captures that feeling of obsession, of love, and of again of beauty. He captures it so perfectly. So I would like 100% recommend this to anyone who wants to read it. It's really not that long, and probably one of the best books that I've read. Probably the best book I've read this year. Which it's only the start, but yeah, no, thank you. Subscribe.